In the winter of 1872, long before paved roads and railway lines reached into the deepest corners of the American South, there existed a place that few maps ever acknowledged, and even fewer travelers ever spoke of for long. A settlement known as Black Hollow, hidden within miles of dense forest and low-hanging swamp fog. A place where sound seemed to die before it could travel, and where those who entered often felt as though they had stepped into a pocket of the world that time had chosen to forget. Black Hollow was not large, nor was it particularly remarkable at first glance, consisting of a few dozen weathered wooden cabins arranged in a rough circle around a central clearing. Yet there was something about its design that felt deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if the layout itself followed rules that had nothing to do with practicality and everything to do with something older, something unseen. At the center of that clearing stood a well. It was not ornate, nor was it unusually large, but it carried a presence that was impossible to ignore, framed by a crude wooden structure reinforced with iron hooks and fitted with a heavy circular lid that could be lowered into place and locked from the outside, a feature that immediately struck outsiders as unnecessary and strangely ominous. The villagers themselves were mostly freed black families who had settled there in the years following the Civil War, seeking refuge from the violence and instability that still gripped much of the region, hoping to build a quiet, self-sustained life far removed from the reach of a society that had never truly accepted their freedom. And for a time, it seemed they had succeeded.
Crops grew in the surrounding soil, livestock grazed at the edges of the forest, and the cabins, though simple, were well maintained, suggesting a community that was both capable and determined to survive. But beneath that fragile sense of normalcy, there existed a silence that did not belong. Visitors who passed through Black Hollow often struggled to describe it, yet many would later recall the same unsettling details: the absence of birdsong, the way conversations among villagers rarely lasted longer than necessary, and the strange habit of people glancing toward the well, not with curiosity, but with something closer to fear. No one spoke openly about it, and if anyone asked questions, the answers, if they came at all, were brief and carefully chosen. "It's just a well." That was all they would say. But it wasn't true.
The first detailed account of Black Hollow came from a traveling preacher named Elijah Carter, who arrived there in the fall of 1871 after losing his way on a poorly marked trail, and who would later describe the village in his journal as a place where the air itself feels burdened, as though something beneath the earth is listening. Carter stayed only one night, yet that night left an impression that would follow him for the rest of his life. He wrote of how the villagers welcomed him with cautious politeness, offering him food and a place to rest, yet never quite relaxing in his presence, their smiles strained, their eyes heavy with something unspoken. As evening approached, Carter noticed a peculiar routine unfold. Just before sunset, two men approached the well. They did not speak. They did not hesitate. They lowered the heavy lid into place and secured it with iron hooks, their movements practiced and deliberate, as though repeating a ritual they had performed countless times before. When Carter asked why they covered the well, the reaction was immediate and chilling. The men froze.
One of them turned slowly, his expression unreadable. And then, without answering, they walked away. That night, Carter struggled to sleep. The village was too quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of the countryside, but a deeper, more oppressive stillness, broken only by the distant creaking of wood and the occasional whisper of wind through the trees. And then sometime after midnight, he heard something. At first, it was faint, so faint that he wondered if he had imagined it. A sound drifting through the silence. Not quite a voice, not quite a movement, but something that seemed to come from outside, from the center of the village, from the well. Carter rose from his bed and moved toward the window, his heart pounding in his chest as he peered out into the darkness. The clearing was empty. The well was sealed. And yet, the sound continued.
A low, almost rhythmic disturbance, like something shifting in a confined space, or something trying to reach the surface. Carter did not investigate further. At dawn, he gathered his belongings and left Black Hollow without saying goodbye, later writing only a single line in his journal that would haunt those who read it. They are not keeping something out of the well. They are keeping something in. Months passed. Black Hollow remained as it was, isolated, quiet, and largely forgotten, until February of 1872, when a supply wagon driven by a man named Thomas Reed was forced off its route by flooding and stumbled upon the village by chance. Reed expected relief, a place to rest, a sign of life. Instead, he found silence, complete and absolute. The cabins stood exactly as they should have. Doors closed, windows intact. No signs of damage or abandonment. But there was no one there. No villagers, no children, no animals, nothing.
Reed called out, his voice echoing through the empty clearing, but no one answered. He moved cautiously from cabin to cabin, opening doors, stepping inside, searching for any sign that might explain what had happened. What he found only deepened the mystery. Inside, everything remained. Clothing neatly folded, meals half prepared, tools set aside as though their owners intended to return within moments. In one cabin, he found a child's doll lying on the floor, its small wooden face tilted toward the doorway, as if it had been dropped in the middle of play. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no blood, no tracks leading away from the village. It was as though time had stopped and then erased every living soul. And then Reed noticed the well. It stood open. The heavy lid that had once sealed it each night now rested to the side, its iron hooks unfastened. Something about it pulled at him. Against his better judgment, Reed stepped closer. The air near the well felt colder. He placed his hands on the stone edge and leaned forward, peering down into the darkness below. At first, he saw nothing, just an endless void swallowing the light. And then, he heard it. A sound. Soft, unclear, but unmistakably present.
Reed jerked back immediately, his breath catching in his throat as a wave of dread surged through him, so sudden and so intense that it felt almost instinctual, as though something deep within him recognized a danger his mind could not comprehend. He did not stay. He did not look again. He left Black Hollow before the sun began to set, driving his wagon as fast as the terrain would allow, not stopping until he reached the nearest town, where he told his story to anyone who would listen. Most did not believe him, but some did. And within days, a small group returned to the village to investigate. What they found matched Reed's account exactly, and offered no answers.
The official investigation was brief. There were theories, of course. Disease, mass migration, violence.
But none could explain the complete absence of bodies or evidence. No graves, no tracks, no signs that the villagers had even attempted to leave. The case was eventually closed, recorded as an unexplained disappearance, and Black Hollow was abandoned once more. But its story did not end there. Years later, in 1893, a group of surveyors entered the region while mapping land for potential development. And though the forest had begun to reclaim the area, they managed to locate what remained of the village. The cabins had collapsed. The clearing was overgrown. But the well remained. Partially buried, its stone rim cracked and worn, yet still present. One of the surveyors, a young man named Daniel Price, documented their findings in a journal,
describing an unease that settled over the team the moment they entered the clearing. "It feels wrong here," he wrote, "like the ground remembers something." When they approached the well, they found it filled in, or at least it appeared that way. But when one of the men stepped onto the soil covering it, he quickly stepped back, claiming the ground felt hollow beneath his weight, as though something below had shifted, as though the well was not truly closed. The men considered digging it up, but the idea was quickly abandoned. No one wanted to be the first to open it. They left the site as they found it and marked it on their maps. Decades passed, and then something strange happened. When historians later attempted to locate Black Hollow using those maps, they found nothing. No clearing, no ruins, no well. Only forest, dense, unbroken, as if the village had never existed at all. Today, the story of Black Hollow survives only in scattered journal entries, fading records, and whispered accounts passed down through generations. A mystery that refuses to be solved, a question that lingers without answer. What happened to the villagers? Where did they go? And perhaps most importantly, what was in the well? Some believe it was nothing more than fear, a shared delusion born from isolation. Others believe it was something far worse, something real, something that the villagers understood long before anyone else. Because they had rules. They followed them every night. They sealed the well. They kept it closed. They kept whatever was inside from reaching the surface. Until one night, they didn't. And if the stories are to be believed, that was the last night Black Hollow ever existed.